I'm sure you've probably noticed it, but life is full of contrasts. And the crazy part of it is that there's a wide range of strong opinions and feelings on just about everything. I've even heard it rumored that some of y'all here root for the Vandals. Okay, it just doesn't make sense to me. You know, how some like, some dislike. I'm joking. There can be strong opinions on anything and everything, especially when it comes to chocolate. Okay? Now, just a quick disclaimer here. John, as he was writing this letter, did not mention chocolate in this letter. So don't be trying to tell me, Pastor, yes, he did. He said the light is better than the dark. Plus, aren't we instructed to greet each other with a holy kiss? I didn't think it was that bad. I kind of hoped I'd get more. I thought I'd get more than just a snicker. All right, I'll stop. Just by a show of hands, how many of you really like chocolate? Okay? And it's okay. You can be proud of it. Okay. Very, very good. Now, we're going to do a little survey this morning. The rest of you just sit here and enjoy. If you don't like chocolate, well, there's more than we can discuss at this morning that's wrong with you. So I'm sorry, I'm joking. And he's a Vandals fan. That explains a lot, doesn't it? Yeah. No. This is for the chocolate lovers in the crowd. But I want to narrow it down just a little bit more. How many of you prefer light chocolate or milk chocolate, as some would say? You can tell they're a little bit hesitant to admit that because their hands are only coming up so high. Oh, there's a few back there. Okay. Okay. All right. How many prefer dark chocolate? There's a lot more arms up. I'm sorry, folks. And they're all up high and proud. Okay. How many prefer both? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. My wife loves chocolate. I mean, she really loves chocolate, and not just any chocolate. She likes dark chocolate. 65% or higher in actual cocoa content, and she's happy. Now, if you get up in the 80s, it gets a little bit bitter, and we don't have to go there, but it's okay in a pinch. But that 65 to 75 range, pretty happy camper, right? Okay, so, and through the years, she has convinced me that good, smooth, dark chocolate is pretty good. And so we've kind of, when we travel, when you travel, when you go to tourist places and things like that, what do you often see a lot of? Chocolate shops, because they know tourists are going to stop there on vacation. Calories don't count. They're going to go and they're going to buy chocolates. And the better the chocolate, the more expensive it is, you know. It's kind of like, so we kind of like to do that. And we've learned that we only buy just a little bit if it's someplace new, because it might not be very good, and it's expensive enough that you can justify a little bit. Plus, the other side of that is if you only buy a little bit, you're not going to overindulge as much, and so it's like, okay. And if it's really, really, really good, you know what you can always do? You can go back. Okay, so, anyway, we've done that. But a few years ago, we discovered they're special fancy schmancy chocolate bars. They're not Hershey's, they're not Nestle's. They're these gourmet chocolate bars. And we were visiting the Oregon coast, and we found this one brand that had all of these different styles of flavors of chocolate. And I forgot to put that up there for the dark chocolate and the light chocolate. I'm sorry. But Moonstruck chocolate, it's made in Portland. And it's a kind of a gourmet. It's not the most expensive. We have a friend that his daughter worked for his sister-in-law. Her sister-in-law and his sister-in-law and husband established a chocolate shop there in Portland, and their chocolate bars were like $8 a bar. I'm like, that ain't happening. And you could go to this place, and for $50 you could make your own chocolate bar, and they'd give you a tour and show you how to do it. Didn't get to do that, but and they were making a living of it, doing well. But this brand, Moonstruck, had several flavors, and so you got to try them all. because you don't know which ones are going to be your favorite. But we narrowed it down that there were 2 flavors we liked the most. One of them was my favorite, one of us hers. One is the sea salt with almonds dark chocolate bar, and one is just the smooth dark chocolate bar. Now, we still disagree on which is best. We can both tolerate each other's choice. And things were going pretty good. It was just on vacation. And then we discovered a store in Twin Falls that was selling Moonstruck chocolate. And I was kind of like the old Scooby-Doo character, Ruh-Roh. Because when those babies go on sale, and even when they're not on sale, we might buy 1 or 2 or 5. They keep in the refrigerator really good because they're so rich, you only have a little bit. And it'll last a long time. So then you don't feel quite so guilty spending $3 for a chocolate bar. When it'll last a week, it's like, okay, well, that's not too bad. But anyway, how many think that Debbie prefers, which one do you think Debbie prefers? How many think it's the smooth dark chocolate? How many think it's the sea salt with almonds? You would be correct. She likes that one. I like the smooth chocolate. But you know what? Like I said, either one of them we would take in a pinch. It just doesn't matter. Now, I know this is kind of silly, and you're wondering, what in the world does this have to do with 1 John? Nothing. Except that it shows the contrast between light chocolate and dark chocolate. But here's the deal. My toes have been so sore because John has just been stepping on them and pounding on them for the last several weeks. I thought, just for fun, we would do something silly before we jump back in and let him stomp on our toes again, okay? So that's all that was. That's all it was. So anyway, we jump back in today, back to chapter 2, verse 28, and we're going to see that as we've gone to this point so far, as we transition to chapter 3, we're going to see these contrasts that are so much more important than what kind of chocolate we like. There's light versus darkness. There's the new command versus the old command. We are to love the Father versus love the world. We're to love Christ instead of the Antichrist. And we're to be children of truth instead of children of lies. These are the contrasts that John has brought to us so far up to this point where we jump into chapter 3 this morning. And today we're going to see another contrast that he's going to point out regarding our identity. We're either children of God or we're children of the devil. As we begin this transition, we're going to try to figure out today what the difference between the two is. And we're going to see, as we've gone from chapter 1 and 2, that his main focus was light. We're going to see now in the next couple chapters, in 3 and 4, that the topic moves from light to love. And today we're going to see the purity of love that John is talking about. Next week we're going to look at the practicality of love as we learn about how to love each other, love our brothers and sisters in Christ. And the following week we're going to dive really deep and look at the perfect love of the Father. So let's pick up again in verse 28 of chapter 2, and we see this incredible promise that the children of God who live in relationship with God and with his Son Jesus, we have when we abide, when we remain in him. When he comes again, we don't have to have any worries or concerns because we know who he is and whose we are. We're his. We're adopted sons and daughters of God. So, and now, dear children, continue in him so that when he appears, we may be confident and unashamed before him at his coming. And then he goes on in verse 29, if you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone who does what is right has been born of him. I love that phrase, what is right. If we do what is right. In Deuteronomy, as we sang in our first song, and now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And then the last song that we sang, Micah chapter 6, verse 8, he has showed you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. What is right? Fear God. Not that we're cowering and afraid of him, but rather we have an intense, healthy, intentional understanding of his power and of his might. We respect that. We're really glad we're on his team. And as children of God, we walk in ways that he guides and teaches. His children love him. They serve him with all their heart and all their soul. Micah just adds to that principle, do what the Lord asks. Act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. And if we do that, right here, right now, we're going to look forward with confidence to the day that Jesus comes again or we stand before our God in heaven. We don't have any fear because we know whenever he comes, we're ready for him. And we have that confidence because of the next verse in our study, the verse that Jacob hijacked on me this morning for the stewardship thought. I'm joking, that was great. See what love, great love, the Father has lavished on us. I mean, he didn't just give it to us. He gave it to us abundantly. That we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. If you've read John's account of Jesus' life, the Gospel of John, these words sound familiar because he wrote them in the first chapter of the book of John. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or of 100 husbands' will, but born of God. Friends, how great, how marvelous is the Father's love for you and me. He sent his Son to us. God came to us. He chose to take the consequence of sin and put it on his shoulders on the cross. He died for us. Why? So heaven could be ours. So that those who received and accepted Christ's sacrifice, believing in his love, his mercy, and his forgiveness, they would live. He gave us the opportunity to choose him to be our Father. He gave us his name. He adopted us as his own. There were two brothers that wanted to play Little League. And they had to go to the park and sign up. And the official that was sitting at the table where they signed up was puzzled when he took their papers. And according to the papers, he noticed that these two brothers were only 6 months apart in age. Your brothers, he asked. Yep, they answered. But you're only 6 months apart, the puzzled official countered. Well, one of us was adopted. Which one? You know, we ask our dad that all the time, but he says he can't remember. That's us. Brothers and sisters, that's us. That's what John's talking about. That's this lavish love that the Father has poured, has bestowed upon us, that we should be called the children of God. A love that's so pure that nothing in this world can compare. And while children of God's a title for believers, it also reveals a really solid fact. God's children. And that's the possessive God's. That's what we are. That's big. God gives us both the title and the reality. When he calls Christians his children, he makes them to be just that. Great as he is, God has brought believers into a loving, intimate relationship of children with their Father. And John continues in verse 2. Dear friends, we are now children of God, and what we will be has not been yet made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Not we will be children of God someday. We're children of God now. And though we don't know for sure what we will be or look like when Jesus comes again, it's going to all make sense. I think John's not quite certain what this is going to look like. Because as descriptive as he is, He would have told us if he knew. And I know this is the guy that wrote that I've seen him, I've touched him, I spent 2.5 years of my life with him. I watched him do things nobody ever has or ever will do again. He remembers the different sides of Jesus he witnessed. Teacher, scholar, friend, the sacrifice on the cross, the resurrected Lord, as well as the glory of Christ he saw when he was transfigured before James and John and Peter. He's seen all sides of Jesus, but what he's saying to us is what he's going to look like and what we're going to look like isn't nearly as important as the promise. We are. We are the children of God, and we will be like him. That's incredible. Then it continues in verse 3. All who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. I love the word hope. I love that he uses this. All who have this hope. It implies a promise and a process. Something that is to come. In some ways that seems to contradict the verse statement in verse 1 and verse 2. Children of that's what we are, now we are. Wait a minute, but hope implies we're going to become. So which way is it? Both. Kind of like some of you with light and dark chocolate. It's both. When we accept the gift of forgiveness, the life that Christ paid on the cross, we're complete. We are in Christ. We are adopted. That's the promise. We are children of God. But until the day that Christ comes again, or we pass from this life to eternity, whichever comes first, until that day, John's encouraging us, do your best to look more and more and act more and more like your big brother Jesus. Understanding, as he reminds us in verse 2, we don't look like him completely yet, but someday we're going to see him as he is, and we're going to look like him. So let's do our best to live like him now. We'll make mistakes, because if we could be perfect, if we could do this on our own and do it perfectly, Jesus wouldn't have needed to come. But John encourages us, make every effort, do your best to love like and live like Jesus, because he did that for us, as he explains in the next few verses. Verse 4, everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. I shared with you last week that the Antichrist was one that is against Christ. And the Antichrist, capital Anti, is similar to what John referred to as the beast in his book of Revelation, as well as what Paul referred to as the man of lawlessness in his writings. So if we sin, we're lawless. The original language gives us a little more insight into what he means here when he says everyone who sins break the law. Because if that's the case, we're all toast. Well, that's true, unless something has been done about it. But when we see the original language, John's not referring to a one-time action. He's rather talking about a continual, ongoing behavior that doesn't stop and you have no intention of stopping. I mentioned a few weeks ago that when our boys were younger, I coached a lot of teams, soccer, baseball, basketball, even help them with track some, but a lot of basketball especially. And our teams often won because of two simple things. I mean, when they started in the third grade, there were two things that I did. I taught my players how to shoot a layup and how to shoot a free throw. And we worked on those and we practiced those. And so even the weakest player on the team that really didn't have a clue of where the ball was supposed to be going this way or that way, if they got within 3 feet of the basket, they could put the ball in the hole. They could put the ball in the basket. They were pretty much, they had it down. As the kids got older, even with the free throws, I worked them to the place it's like, okay, you don't leave until you've shot 5 in a row. And the older they got, it was 10 in a row. And that was motivation. They studied, they worked, they got it, they practiced, they got it. So they didn't spend all of their practice time and free time out beyond the three-point line shooting the ball from the hip, because that was the only way they could get enough strength to get it that far. They were practicing the shots they could shoot and do it consistently. And because of that, we never left many points on the floor because we missed our layups at our free throws. And when you're that young, you're going to win games. Okay? And it worked. It worked. They could shoot the free throw. They could shoot the layup. with hardly even thinking about it. It was just automatic. Muscle memory and mental memory, it made a huge difference. That's what John's talking about here about sin. If we keep doing sin, things that violate the law of God, the will of God, they go against his nature and his purpose for us. And if we keep doing it over and over and over again, pretty soon we're going to get so good at it, we're not even going to think about it. We're not even going to realize we're doing it. And pretty soon, we've walked so far away from the light of God that we're walking in darkness. And we didn't even notice it happening. That's what John's warning about. Do not practice it. Don't do it over and over again. Recognize when you do, have a broken heart, be sorry, be repentant, and then quit doing it. Figure out how you can get to the place in your life that you're not choosing to do that. Because when we grow that comfortable and familiar with sin, the very thing that separates us from a holy God, it's a problem. It moves us away from the safety and the comfort of his glorious light, and it inches us nearer and nearer into the darkness of this world. It's not a good thing. Because before we realize what's happened, we have stumbled from light into darkness. But you know that he appeared, verse 5 says, so that he might take away our sins. And in him is no sin. No one who lives in him keeps on sinning. No one who continues to sin has either seen him or known him. That lavish love that the Father has poured on us, he came to take away the punishment for sin on the cross of Calvary. And if we know that, and if we've accepted his gift and we've chosen to be adopted as a child of God, we're not going to keep doing over and over the things that he rescued us from in the first place. He loved us enough to come and do what he did. Our love for him needs to be we listen to him and do what he asks. Sin. Those who are able to live like this, lovers of the darkness and the things of the world, John's making a really strong statement. They either never knew or recognized who Jesus is and what he did, or, as he said last week, they walked away from it. They decided they didn't care what the Father had done for them, and they walked away. These are strong words, but they're important words because John recognizes at the end of the day, we are either children of God or we're children of the devil. Which child are you? He continues in verse 7, dear children, do not let anyone lead you astray. Let's see here, I'm looking at here. I am one behind. Dear children, do not let anyone lead you astray. The one who does what is right is righteous, just as he is righteous. Did you know that the enemy of our soul cannot do anything to us unless we allow him to? God has limited his power that much. Satan cannot produce new children. People only become children of the devil by listening to and imitating the evil one. That's why John says, don't love the world or anything of the world. Love the Father. Stay in the light. Satan can only deceive and draw people away from the light of the Father. And earlier, John warned us that. You either love the Father or love the world, but you can't do both. And today he reminds us, don't let anyone lead you away from the Father. If we know him, we're going to stay close beside him, and we're going to live like him. We're going to do what we learned earlier is the right thing to do. Verse 8, the one who does what is sinful is of the devil, because the devil's been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the devil's work. We've all known someone somewhere who was a bully. Maybe it was us. They come in all shapes and sizes, bigger, stronger, smarter, powerful, hateful. The list goes on and on. And for one reason or another, a bully is convinced they can torment, they can pick on those who are weaker or even just different and make life miserable for their intended target. It started in the garden when a serpent drove a wedge between Adam and Eve and God. And it's been going on ever since. The enemy continued to draw people either by deception or simply by overwhelming them to the point that they felt hopeless and helpless, and he drove them away from the love and the light of God. Even when he confronted Jesus in the wilderness, his desire was to steal the identity of Christ as a child of God. That's what he was going for. Deny God and come to me. Don't miss this. The enemy's number one goal is to steal the identity of those who know God. Jesus came to stop the enemy, to destroy his work, and he did this on the cross. I've seen this picture over and over again, and I love it because love starts here. The pure love of the Father starts here. We understand that the enemy is still at work. He's doing his best to draw people out of God's light and moving them into the darkness. And it seems like it would have been easier if when Jesus came, he would have just destroyed Satan once and for all. So we didn't have to deal with it ever again. That's justice the way we see it. How many movies have we watched where the bully gets taken down either by the group of people stepping up to them and saying no more, or one person coming along? You know, it's always kind of fun to see a movie where the scrawny kid that's been being picked on constantly finally gets up the courage and pops someone, and the bully runs away in fear. But that's not what was best for us. That's justice the way we see it. But the Father's love, and the reason it is so amazing, so incredible, a love beyond reason, is because Jesus came to undo Satan's work so that people, even those caught up in the things of this world, could step out of the darkness into the light and love, being rescued by the Savior. The way God did it, the way Jesus came and destroyed the work of the enemy, was so that you and I had a choice. We could say, yes, I want to be a child of God, or we could say, nope, I'm going to keep doing it on my own. It's our choice. John continues in verse 9, no one who is born of God will continue to sin, because God's seed remains in them. They cannot go on sinning because they've been born of God. Again, he's talking about an ongoing, repeated living in opposition to God. Getting so used to sin that we don't even recognize it or care. If we're the children of God, and John emphatically states we are, if we've accepted the gift of Christ, we're his children, then we're not going to live recklessly. We're not going to live without thought to how our life choices can and do impact our relationship with him. And quite honestly, our relationship with others. He finishes this portion of the text in verse 10. This is how we know who the children of God are and who the children of the devil are. Anyone who does not do what is right is not God's child, nor is anyone who does not love their brother and sister. Just like Jesus in the wilderness, you and I have a choice to make. The enemy will approach us at different places and different times and make it look really, really, really good. He'll put that plate of brownies in front of us and say, oh, it's just a little bit. It won't hurt you. But we know a little bit here, a little bit there, and pretty soon we're walking in darkness. Will we choose to love God and to love others by doing what is right? Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with our God as children of God? Or will we choose to only love ourselves, doing what we want, when we want, without really caring how our choices and behavior impact our relationship with God or with others? Next week, we're going to look really closely at the practicality of God's love and what love is. We're going to look closely at how God's children are to love each other. But that's next week. Today, I pray that in the midst of this text, we don't miss the most important thing that John is writing to remind us of, and that is a love that's beyond reason. God's love that started in a manger and led to a cross, so that you and I, those who were lost in sin, separated from God because of it, could have hope for this life and the next, because of a love of another kind, a love that's beyond reason, a love that burns bright in the heart of a father, and a love that shines bright in the lives of his children. Two contrasts: child of God, child of the devil. And the question that you and I we must ask ourselves is, whose child do I want to be? We live in a confusing time. And the Ledbetter family is going to pass out a reading to you while I'm talking here, so don't be distracted. I've asked them to do this. We live in a crazy, confusing time, and I know that all of us have been discouraged and concerned about a lot of things that have been going on in our country and in our world. And I'm one of those as well. We've prayed a lot about this. But a couple weeks ago, I came across this reading that I had to chuckle. It was written by a young dad, and it was late at night, and he kind of had been watching the news, and when he wrote this, it's gone viral, and you may have seen it, but he wrote this kind of a prayer, kind of a statement. He goes, "The ramblings of a tired dad," is the way he signed it. But I believe it encouraged me so much that I wanted to share it with you, and I thought it fits in so well with our messages through 1 John of how we are to live as children of the light. And so I just want to share this with you this morning. And if you didn't get a copy, we'll get that to you a little bit later. This young man, a young dad, is a youth and family pastor at a church back in Arkansas. But he writes this, and I put the title up there for such a time as this because it's so much like what we read about Queen Esther. Don't feel sorry for or fear for your kids, because the world they're going to grow up in is not what it used to be. God created them and called them for the exact moment in time that they're in. Their life wasn't a coincidence or an accident. Raise them up to know the power they walk in as children of God. Train them in the authority of His Word. Teach them to walk in faith, knowing God is in control. Empower them to know they can change the world. Don't teach them to be fearful and disheartened by the state of the world, but hopeful that they can do something about it. Every person in all of history has been placed in the time they were because of God's sovereign plan. He knew Daniel could handle the lion's den. He knew David could handle Goliath. He knew Esther could handle Haman. He knew Peter could handle the persecution. He knows that your child can handle whatever challenge they face in their life. He created them specifically for it. Don't be scared for your children, but be honored that God chose you. Listen to that. God chose you to parent the generation that's facing the biggest challenges of our lifetime. Rise up to the challenge. Raise Daniels, Davids, Esthers, and Peters. God isn't scratching his head wondering what He's going to do with this mess of a world. He has an army. He's raising up to drive back the darkness and make Him known over all the earth. Hear this line. Don't let your fear steal the greatness God has placed in them. I know it's hard to imagine them as anything besides our sweet little babies, and we just want to protect them from anything that could ever be hard on them. But they were born for such a time as this. Friends, we can be children of light, children of God, or we can keep stumbling along, flirting with the darkness. But I love the challenge that this young dad was inspired to write. Don't fear the greatness. Don't let your fear rob them of the greatness that God has placed within them. Don't let your fear rob you of the greatness that God has put in you, because God has put us here for such a time as this. This is the purity of God's love. This is His plan. This is His purpose for His church. So rather than being afraid and drawing in to protect ourselves, get ready to go. Let's change the world one life at a time, sharing with them the hope that they too can be a child of God. Father, I pray that You would help these things that we've talked about, John's text, as well as this encouragement from this young dad. Lord, help us to be challenged to grow and be confident and secure. Lord, help us live our life in a way that we don't rob the greatness of who you are and what you want to do in and through us to anything that this world has to offer. We are the children of God. That is what we are. That's amazing. That's a love beyond reason. That's love of another kind. We can't imagine the purity of that love. But God, help us to take that love and go forth and share it with anyone and everyone who will listen, so that you might be glorified and that the world might be changed one life at a time because of you shining bright through us. That's our prayer, Father, in Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen. If you have questions this morning, if you're here and you're wondering, okay, Andy, I need to talk about this. I got questions. I need to know more about this. You grab me. Let's talk. We can talk today. We can talk this week. I don't care when. But I want you to have that confidence that you are a child of God. Nothing more important than that. So don't hesitate, don't wait, and go forth and let's live our life in such a way that people see him shining out of us. God bless you. Have an amazing week. I look forward to seeing you throughout the week and next Sunday as we celebrate and we learn how we can do the best job of loving each other. God bless.